In this video, I will show you how to crochet the linen stitch, which is also referred to as the moss stitch, as well as show you a couple of different techniques and tips for color changes that will produce different color patterns from the same stitch. To start, I have some worsted weight yarn here. I recommend using an either 3 or 4 weight, sort of a medium weight yarn to practice this stitch on. I have a 5mm hook. Begin my foundation chain. I'm going to start with an odd number of stitches. So I'm going to place my slip knot on my hook, and I'm going to chain out 15. Okay, there's my 15 stitches. So I'm going to skip the next 2 chains and then place a single crochet in the 3rd chain. So this is US terms, single crochet, skip 2, single crochet in that 3rd chain from the hook. And I'm going to chain 1, skip 1, so not the one that we just worked out of, but skip the next chain, single crochet in the next chain. And that's going to be our stitch repeat to the end of the row. Chain 1, skip 1, single crochet in the next. Chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. Chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. Chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. When you get to the end of your row, you should have 2 chains left. So chain 1, skip the next chain, and single crochet into that very last chain. And that is the end of row 1. For row 2, I'm going to turn my work over, leaving my working yarn in the back here, and I'm going to chain up 2. And this is where I'm going to use my stitch marker. I'm just going to simply place my stitch marker around those 2 chains. And if you don't have a stitch marker, you can use a paper clip, or you can use a strand of contrasting yarn and just lay it right over the top of those 2 chains. It's going to help identify this ending spot when we come to it later. So I have my single crochet from the row below and my chain space right next to it. But we're going to be working in the chain spaces in between each of those single crochets. So I'm going to single crochet in that chain space and then chain 1. I'm going to skip the single crochet and single crochet into the chain space. So it's kind of like our first row where we were skipping chains and working into the next chain. In this situation, we're going to be skipping the single crochets and working into the chain spaces. So chain 1, skip the single, work into that next space, chain 1, work into the chain space, chain 1, skip the single, work into that chain 1 space, chain 1, skip the single, work into the next space. Now we've come to the end of our row and we have our single crochet along with the chain 2 when we skipped those first 2 chains at the beginning when we did our foundation chain. So I'm going to chain 1, skip that single crochet, and then work right into the side where we had those 2. It's kind of tricky to work into. This is probably the trickiest one right here, working into the side and that chain 2 space, and work our last single crochet. So you'll begin the row with a chain 2 and end the row with a single crochet. Row 3 is going to be the exact same thing. However, when I get to the end of the row, I'm going to show you how to change colors. So I'm going to chain 2 and place my stitch marker around so I know where the end space is at. And I'm going to work right in between, once again, placing a single crochet in that chain space. Chain 1, skip 1, single crochet, just going to continue that to the end of the row here. That chain 1 right after the single crochet almost becomes kind of automatic after you do it a few times. Chain 1. So now I've come to the end of my row, and here's where that stitch marker will be helpful. Here's my single crochet and then that chain 2 space. So I'm just going to simply take the stitch marker out, and I'm going to work my final single crochet into that chain 2 space. But I'm going to change colors on this one, so I'm going to yarn over and pull through, but instead of pulling through with the current color, I'm going to change and put my new color on here. So I'm going to place that over my hook and pull it through. And I'll show you that. Once again, insert, grab with the old color and pull it through, 2 loops on the hook. Now I'm going to take my new color and just place it over the hook. You can also make a little loop with a slip knot if you prefer and pull that through. Now I'm ready to start with my new color. And pull that down just a little bit, not too tight. I'm going to chain up 2. Once again, I'm going to place a stitch marker around that chain 2 so I know where to work in my next round or my next row. Single crochet in that first chain space, and continue to do what we've done in the last few rows. Just chaining and skipping and working in the next chain space from the next spot. Chain 1, skip 1, here I've come to the end of my row, and that's where that little stitch marker can come in handy. I'm going to skip that single crochet and work a single crochet in that one. Chain 2, place my single or my stitch marker around that. After you do a few rows, you probably won't need the stitch marker anymore because you'll be able to identify that end chain. Oops. Now I've come to the end of my row again, and here's that chain 2 being held by the stitch marker. Now if you want to completely change your yarn color to a different color, you can here. However, I'm just going to work right up the side and carry the color A right back up the side. So this is something that you can do if you're just wanting to do stripes of 2 colors, and just pull that right up the side like that. And then when you get done, you can do a border along the side that will cover that up. So once again, I'm going to chain up 2, turn, Place my stitch marker here. And I'm just going to continue to work back and forth in these colors for a few rows. And after I get a few rows done, I will show you what that looks like. Here is my swatch after I've worked a few more rows, and you can see it's a nice reversible fabric, so it looks the same on both sides. And when you're changing the colors every 2 rows, it gives this nice kind of sawtooth or zigzag look to it. You can see on the side where I've carried my yarn colors up, and like I said, if you don't like that, you can always cut the yarn and start over with your new color. However, if you know you're going to be working a border, you can just simply work your border right over the top of those strands if you don't mind carrying them up. So I also have a swatch that I've started where I'm changing the colors every single row, and you can see that there's quite a bit of a difference in the way that it looks. This one actually gives more of like a checkered or a grid look with it. So if I'm changing colors, there's a couple things that I can do when I'm working one row with a different color each time. I can either simply cut the yarn and weave in my ends or work over them, or I can switch the color and carry the other strand underneath while working in the next color. So I will show you quickly here how to do that. I'm going to chain 1 and work my last single crochet in that chain 2 space. I don't have a stitch marker in these. And I'm going to pull through with my new color, just as I've done before, and flip it over. Now I'm going to just take my color that I was using in the last row and place it over the top, and then chain 2 with my new color. I'm going to work that single crochet down in this space right here and leave this color just kind of draped right over here on the top. So I'll chain 1 again, leaving this strand on the top here, just working right over the top of that one. So if you know you're going to be working in 2 colors, this is an easy way to do it without having to cut the yarn each time, because it does become a little bit troublesome having to weave in all of those ends. And then I just continue to work over the top. You may want to pull this strand every few stitches to keep it nice and tight so the yarn doesn't peek out. However, you don't want to pull it too tight so that your stitches bunch up. But that is another option for changing colors if you want to change the color for every row. Once again, when I get to the end here, I'm just going to go right into that chain 2 space and pull my new color through and then flip it over. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, as well as to subscribe to my channel for more crochet tutorials.